What's up? Welcome back to the Metal Hip Car Show. There are so many cool cars out there. A statement that's been made on this channel so many times. But there is one question that a lot of non-car people ask, and that is, does it need to exist? And 50% of the time, probably not, but it's cool, so we turn a blind eye to it. But as a car guy, I want to point out 5 cars that, as cool as they are, probably don't need to exist. Let's get right into it. Starting off with a ultra-low production supercar from a little brand called Lamborghini. I love Lamborghini. I love this car. I'm not shitting on it, but it does need to be mentioned. The 2010 Lamborghini Reventon Roadster. When the Reventon came out, it was one of the really early ultra-low production Lamborghinis. It was kind of more of a styling thing than anything else. But due to it had this ultra-wild styling, it was made to be this kind of really cool collector's item almost. It had the same power and same specs for the most part as an LP640, but it just looked so crazy. So Lamborghini could pull off making 20 some odd cars, charging $2.5 million for it and moving on. And they did, until 2010. They brought out the Lamborghini Reventon Roadster. Now, this one was a little bit cool, a little bit unique. What made this one different was the engine, as when the Reventon Coupe got the 6.5 liter LP640 spec V12, this one got the 6.5 liter LP670S V spec V12. So it was the only convertible Lamborghini to get that engine, but also, why? Who asked for this? It's so cool that it exists. But bringing back an extremely low production sports car 2 years later, after it did its ultra low production run, doesn't make sense to me. Had they made this when the Reventon was out in the first place, cool, all for it. But why 2 years later? Truthfully, when it first came out, I thought it was weird and I didn't really know if it needed to exist. 10 years later, I still hold that opinion. Next up, the, once again, ultra rare Ferrari 430 Scuderia Spider. Now, it's not an unpopular opinion to call the Ferrari 430 Scuderia one of the coolest Ferraris ever made. And frankly, I think the F430 Spider is a gorgeous car. So, why am I whining about this? Reason is, the 430 Scuderia was made as a track monster. It was gutted, it had awful Ferrari welds on it, and everything was made to be super light and no compromise, so it'd be a perfect track toy. So when you remove the roof from a car and make it into a convertible, the chassis loses a lot of its structural integrity. So what you actually need to do is put in a lot of chassis bracing to make it as stiff as it was, which some companies get there, a lot don't though. So what you usually end up with is a chassis that's heavier, but also not as strong for the effort to have a convertible. Now in some cars, that doesn't matter. Cutting the roof off might actually make it better. But when it's a track-focused Ferrari, that's never made sense to me, and it still doesn't. I remember seeing it the first time ever in a DuPont registry and being completely confused towards why it existed, even then. Very cool car, don't get me wrong, but we didn't really need the special edition track-focused Ferraris in convertible form. We didn't back in 2009 or 10, we still don't now. Next up, the 2015 Shelby Mustang Super Snake. For those who don't know, the Super Snake was a spec of GT500 that was Shelby modded, usually with either bigger supercharger or, for the old ones, superchargers. This started back in the 1960s and was brought back when the GT500 was brought back in 2007. Some variations of that GT500 making up to 725 horsepower, and some later models making 850, along with some special models being the Super Snake 1000 making 1000 horsepower. So what's the problem with the 2015 car? Well, as most of you may remember, we didn't actually have a GT500 in 2015. Ford brought out the S550 platform in 2015, but the GT500 did not come out until 2020. But Shelby jumped the gun, and you could actually go buy Super Snake versions of a Mustang GT. Which, I'm sorry, kind of defeats the purpose of the Super Snake. The Super Snake was always meant to be the insane upped GT 500, so putting that onto a Mustang GT for the sake of doing it never really made sense to me. And yes, those Coyote engines are awesome, and they're making literally just as much power, I know. But by putting it onto any Mustang GT, you kind of lose every single bit of specialness that the Super Snake had in the past. I'm a Mustang fan, and I'm a Super Snake fan just the same. I think these things are super cool, but I didn't think that car needed to exist. Next up, I don't really think this is an odd opinion, but coupe SUVs. Now, when I say coupe SUVs, I don't mean like the 90s two-door Ford Explorers. What I mean is the modern SUVs with the hatchback or sloping back rear end. To the best of my memory, the first company to do this was BMW with the X6. If I'm wrong about that, let me know. But what they did there was get the X5 and then cut the roof back a little bit, which kind of gave it this more sleeker, sportier look. Now, inherently, I didn't hate how the X6 looked, but truthfully, as an SUV, I thought it was dumb. The whole point of an SUV is having something big that you can use, you can just toss various couches into. So the idea of cutting the roof down and making it have less space is dumb. BMW is guilty of it, Mercedes is guilty of it, I'm pretty sure Porsche is guilty of it, I'm sure I'm missing something else, but it doesn't make sense. Along with that, I'm pretty sure that's more or less what Tesla does with their Model X and Model Y. And if you want to say, well, if they had the regular SUV roof, then this car wouldn't have a purpose to exist. That's fine. We don't need 5 different variations of the exact same SUVs with slight changes to the body. And the big question is, why would these companies make an SUV that's substantially less usable than the other SUVs? Simple. People are dumb enough to buy it. If you feel attacked by that, I apologize, but the truth needs to be said. And the last one I'm going to mention is the Chevy SSR. Now, truthfully, I have a place in my heart for the SSR. It's a stupid vehicle and I love it. Now, a lot of the other cars, I was kind of crapping on them purely because I just don't think they make sense for quite what they are. We don't need a convertible track car. We don't need a convertible out 2 years later after the coupe went out of production and so on and so forth. But with the SSR, the whole concept of it was such a huge risk and truthfully didn't really pay off. Now, for the 5 people out there who don't know what a Chevy SSR is, it was a Chevy pickup truck based on the Colorado platform that was reduced to a 2-seater but had a metal electric folding roof to make it a convertible and had the engine options of the Chevy 5.3-liter V8 or the LS2 Corvette engine. Now, truthfully, let's face it, the LS2 with a 6-speed manual in that is cool. I don't care if you want to call it a sissy truck, it makes 400 horsepower and will do burnouts all day long. It's cool. Then what's the problem? Well, with the vehicle itself, kinda nothing. I know it failed, I know that's a really unpopular opinion, but truthfully, it's hilarious. I think we need a little bit more of that in our life. So what's actually wrong with it? This truck came out right in a time where GM was struggling for money, and they decided to bring out a retro-styled convertible muscle pickup truck. Not something that they could guarantee would make money. Retro-styled convertible muscle pickup truck. Now, I get it. The retro styling thing was in. Ford is doing it, Chevy is big on it, Dodge is bringing back a lot of old names and experimenting with some old styling. Now, the SSR was such an extreme version of all this, I think it was generally too much for the general public. And it ended up being one of these things of, it looked a little bit too silly for the people who did want a muscle truck. The people who wanted the truck didn't really want a convertible. And the people who really wanted a retro-style throwback vehicle didn't necessarily want a truck. So despite I love them, it didn't make sense. One last thing I'll point out with the SSR, when Chevy was in development of the SSR, they weren't 100% sold on it, and they were going back and forth between the SSR or a new Chevy Bel Air. The Bel Air being a 2-door convertible that was going to compete with the Ford Thunderbird. And ultimately, they went with the SSR, which thank God, because that Belair is ugly. Anyway, that's 5 cars I don't believe needed to exist. But I want to know, what do you think? Do you agree with me, or am I full of crap? And is there any I missed? Let me know in the comments. Thank you all so much for watching. Like, subscribe if you enjoyed the video you've seen. I post on Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday, and I'll see you later.